right? There's a number of people that want the title, want the perceived power, position, but really at the end of the day, leadership is about building your people, helping your people. Because if I'm a leader, I'm already at a position where people have a high opinion or good opinion of me. That's why they put me in the role, hopefully, right? So now, and this goes back to, my people aren't my competition. My desire now is I want to bring them up, right? I'm not going to be here forever. I might decide I want to go, fishing in the Caribbean or whatever one of these days, and somebody's got to take my place.
Okay. So, hey everyone, welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm channeling my barbecue energy right now, and what I mean by that is, my guest today is William Davis. You're in around Dallas, Texas, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, just outside Dallas.
Yeah, and we were talking about barbecue, and I was getting very, very excited about the barbecue. And William, I'll take up your offer, and next time I'm down there,
absolutely
bring me to your favorite place. What was it called? Shady
Oaks. Shady Oaks. It's just Shady north Oaks. Of downtown Fort Worth.
Okay. Well, there's a shout out to Shady Oaks. If you want to sponsor this podcast, you're welcome to as well. All right. Well, let me do a quick intro. William, so right now you're a seasoned leadership expert. You're an author. You're a former corporate guy, right? With nearly 40 years of experience in senior roles across everywhere from Walmart to financial services. You've done consulting. So you've done a number of things, huh?
I have. Yes, sir.
Okay. And it looks like nowadays you're taking all that experience and you are a leadership consultant and you do a lot of speaking, mentoring, but really sounds like a lot of what you're trying to do right now, like coaching leaders and helping leaders grow. It's coming from your personal experiences, right? Your personal experience of corporate America and quite frankly, corporate anywhere, of how leaders are, how they can be better, and how they need to be much more values-based, relationship-based, and telling great stories to their team. So welcome, William. Yeah. And by the way, it is William. I'm just going to assume you're not being polite.
That's
okay.
Good.
Okay. I go by Dave or David, by the way. So you can call me whatever you want, or dude.
Dude, I like that.
So William, maybe that's my introduction to you. Like, I guess when you introduce yourself and what you do and where you've come from, what do you say?
Well, my desire around leadership goes back to my high school and college days. I was in an organization called Future Business Leaders of America and was very involved in it in both high school and college, and really kind of set the foundation for how I viewed leadership, right? It's very personal, relationship oriented. And so as I have gone with my corporate career, I've tried to take the good from people that I respect and feel like they do a really good job as leaders, and incorporate that into what I do and how I deal with people, but also note the bad, right? And one, make sure I don't do that, and two, try to help people move away from those types of ways they act and way they treat people. To me, and this may be part of the fact I'm getting older, right? I turned 60 last year. I just don't have much patience anymore for corporate anywhere treating people in such a manner to where they don't understand the humanity of who they're dealing with, right? And we can talk about that as we move forward, because I've got some examples and stories. And where it really drove home with me was I do a lot of reading on leadership forums and such, and 2023, the World Economic Forum came out with a statement that was very critical of leadership worldwide. Said we had a crisis in leadership across the world. And so in November of the same year, U.S. News and World Report Harris poll came out and said 78% of the respondents for that poll said that we had a leadership crisis in corporate America. And you could go on and said 85% we had a leadership crisis in government. Well, I don't think anybody's shocked about that.
Yeah.
Wherever you're at. But again, those two things reiterated to me that what I was seeing, what I was perceiving, what I was feeling were pretty spot on. We have a disconnect. And as you listen to CEOs when they look at their employee assessments every year of how are we doing as a company, every year corporations are 50, 60, 70% in the leadership approval of our organization. And they're like, well, why is it not 80? Why is it not 90%? Well, it's a pretty simple answer. And that's what I'm trying to focus people in on is get back to the human aspect of dealing with people, right?
Yeah. So talk about what is this crisis that you're describing in leadership?
Well, to me, it's very simple. We have, and I will say just for the last 25 or 30 years, we have started to disconnect between leaders, managers, bosses, however you want to describe them, because they unfortunately use them interchangeably and they're not even close to being the same, and the people that they lead or that they manage. And the first thing that I talk about is the fact that we do not establish relationships anymore. You and I have established a pretty decent relationship just in the 15, 20 minutes that we've been talking before the podcast. And so there's a lot of things that we could talk about. But in the corporate world, when you talk about leading a team, and when we talk about leading, you're really talking about inspiring people, right? You building a trust and building a loyalty and rapport, and so that relationship build is key to being able to have the type of success that a leader desires, not just for themselves, but for their team and their company.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I think we have really disconnected is we have moved, and we talked about this before, just earlier, such a technology driven world now, particularly in the last 25, 30 years with PCs, smartphones, Zoom, and then you talk about the apps, TikTok, YouTube, so forth, that the younger generation that is now coming up into being leaders is not used to having that personal relationship, right? That connects people together. When I was a kid growing up, I grew up on a farm. So everything that I learned growing up, I learned from my dad. Well, how did I learn it? It was hands on, right? It was that personal, close relationship of working together. And I understood what he was doing and why he was doing it and how he was doing it. And I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, and you brought up a great point. Facial recognition of how somebody's attitude is pivotal, right? I can say something to you, but you could see by my facial expression, I'm either full of it or I'm being honest, right? And unfortunately, I think through texts, through emails, through a lot of the technology that we've had and driven and called it advancement, we've lost that. And so, what I really want people to get back to is okay, technology is great, but at the end of the day, leadership is always about humans.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about that relationship because if I can't establish that, the loyalty, the trust, and all the good things that come out of team leadership is either lost or is severely minimized.
Now, does that mean though you won't have conflict if you build a good relationship?
No, you'll have conflict.
Yeah, I asked that
Yeah,
rhetorically. I know the answer is no,
you
but
always you always have conflict. What
yeah.
I've found though, and again, I'm basing this on my experiences, right? What I found though is if I've established that rapport with someone where I have a great relationship or a really good relationship with them, even when I have to have those tough conversations, or even when there is confrontation or disagreement, the attitude in approaching that is different because it's not coming, they don't feel that I'm coming at it from a level of trying to undermine them, make them look bad or against them. They know that based on our relationship, I have the best interest for them at heart. I'm sincerely asking the why, right? And we can discuss it. Or if I don't have that, then again, go back to the mistrust of why is he questioning me? Why is he bringing this up? Why is he bringing it up in this setting, right? And so that drives more problems than just the original issue you're dealing with.
Yeah. So you wrote a book recently. It's you have a number coming out, but there's one that stands out: How to Lead Without Just Managing. right? I guess what are some of the key concepts that you're trying to get across in that book?
Well, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, the very first thing that I establish is the relationship, establishing the relationship. Because if I don't establish the relationship, empathy, communication, trust, all those other components that people look for in great leaders or great, very good leaders is minimized if I don't have that proper relationship. And there's a lot of managers that have leadership capabilities and leadership qualities. All right. I have worked with a number of people. Some of the best leaders I've ever worked with don't have a title, right? They do the work, and they're able to inspire people. They're able to get people to think outside the box, and so and I talk about bosses, but to me, bosses is a non-credible, when you talk about leadership, because people who view themselves as the boss, it's an attitude of you do it because I told you to, right?
Yeah.
And so people may put up with you, but they don't view you as a leader. So when I talk about manager, I talk about managers being the ones that really are responsible for getting the day-to-day work done, right? I've got a team, I get the work done. Leaders, though, and again, they can be managers. I'm not saying that can't happen, but the leaders then go that step above and beyond, which inspires people. It's not just, hey, we got to get this done today, right? It's we get this done. Here's why we get it done. And hey, I'm empowering you as we have these things to do. Let's think outside the box. How do we do them better, right? And you make people then invested in not only what they're doing, but give them the autonomy to now use their brain to say, hey, is there ways to improve this process, right?
Yeah.
And again, as we talked about, technology is advancing so rapidly, and there's so many business forums, business magazines, business trainings out there that, I need to encourage my people to grow, right? My people are not my competition, right? They are the what completes me, from a
Yeah.
career perspective.
Yeah. You talk about inspiring teams and inspiring people. And I think you've mentioned too is storytelling and the power of that creative communication. What's your point of view on storytelling and how that serves as a role to inspire people to get things done and get the things done in a way that gives them autonomy?
Yeah, I think it's very powerful if done right. And again, I think this goes back to, do people view you as sincere, right? I can't treat people like garbage and then come in because maybe a deadline's tight, or we're getting a lot of pressure, and now become everybody's buddy, and try to do the rah-rah speech with them by telling, an inspiring story or whatever, because it's not credible. They look at me as, he doesn't believe that. This is just a show. So I think when you have the team's respect, your people's respect, they see that you are a sincere person with a genuine desire to have the relationship with them, that you look out for their best interests and want them to succeed, then I think storytelling is very powerful. And I'll give you an example. You may have someone that comes in and talks about, we need to get X done for the company because we're changing a transition and going in a different direction or expanding or whatever. That may be the manager version, right? A leader comes in and they talk about the incredible history of the company and the sacrifices that were made, and challenges that were faced, and the critical decisions that were made, and why, and hey, some worked out, some didn't work out, you know but we are at a cusp in our history where we had the opportunity to turn this into and then explain the vision, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have an example of what a good story might be that you've used or you've seen other leaders use to inspire their team?
Well, yeah, I'll go back to 2008 when we had the financial crisis. And I was with a very large bank at that time, and we'd purchased a stock investment company. And the first day that we had meetings with them that I was leading, there was a very critical story that came out of about both organizations from the Wall Street Journal and others, basically saying this was a horrible merger. Both organizations are going to fail because of it. Leaderships on both sides are just awful. And the first thing that I did is I had a copy of that paper and I held it up and I said, guys, this is what people are saying about us. And I said, we are in no different position than, and I named probably a half a dozen other financial institutions at that time that were dealing with situations because of the real estate collapse. And I said, there's nothing different between us and them. The difference is we have now just taken two organizations that were at the top of their industry just a year ago, and now we're bringing them together.
Mm.
And if we have that synergy, and if we have the attitude where, hey, things that caused us to go down were out of our control, and now as things turn around, and now as we get a footing underneath us, we have the ability to make this great. I said, we're going to prove all these naysayers wrong. And I said, what we've got to do is we've got to put these attitudes, we've got to put these talking points that they're using against us out of our minds. Because if we dwell on them, then what's going to happen? We're gonna work into that version of the story where we now have the opportunity to recreate our own story and move forward. And I probably went 30 minutes,
Mm.
and it was not something I had planned because I'd been handed the paper about 5 minutes before the meeting started. And so even though the majority of the people in that room I had never met before, just the passion that I brought the message to them with and reiterated it's a we are in this together. This is not a us and this is not a you. We are now one,
Hmm.
right? We win together, we lose together, right? Everybody in here is critical to the success that we are wanting to have. And so we've got to work based on that.
Yeah. And what was the impact after that?
Our transition went great. I'm not going to say it was all because of that.
That
Obviously, I
one
had a
speech, I'm
ton of
sure, just
people.
drove it.
Yeah, you bet. But I had several people that I had worked with prior at the bank that were in the room and came up and said, "Hey, I was ready to suit up." Right. So what I hope came out of that was that people drop the idea that it's us versus them as far as the purchaser and the purchasee, right? And it is one team. You're going to help us succeed. We're going to help you succeed, and we're going to make this great and move forward.
Awesome. So it sounds like over your career, you've developed your own personal style, right?
Yeah,
And brand. And that sort of leads me to another question is I think especially emerging leaders are conscious about like, hey, how do I want to be perceived? Now you're only in so much control of that, right? But
right.
but you are in control of a lot of like how am I showing up? How am I, showing up to meetings, to in front of my team? I guess what advice do you have for folks out there who are trying to build a personal style in leadership or a personal brand and identity?
Yeah. I always preach the first thing is that you have to want to be a leader for the right reason, right? There's a number of people that want the title, want the perceived power, position, but really at the end of the day, leadership is about building your people, helping your people. Because if I'm a leader, I'm already at a position where people have a high opinion or good opinion of me. That's why they put me in the role, hopefully, right? So now, and this goes back to, my people aren't my competition. My desire now is I want to bring them up, right? I'm not going to be here forever. I might decide I want to go, fishing in the Caribbean or whatever one of these days, and somebody's got to take my place. And I want to be the one to help somebody fulfill that dream if that's what they're wanting to do. So I have to want to be a leader for the right reason. And it's to be there for my people and do for my people. I think the second thing that you have to understand is, again, your team's not your competition. You are there to enable them, to help them succeed, and their success is something you should take great pride in. I've had people that have worked for me that have blown past me in the corporate world. And man, I'm happy for them because that's something that they aspired to, and anything I can do to help them get there, I want to do. I think the other piece that to me is really critical is in building that one-on-one relationship,
Mm-hmm.
not just with the team, but with each individual. And what I tell people is you have to build that one-on-one relationship individually because there's not a one size fits all, right? What works with somebody may not work with somebody else. And I'll give you an example. Nobody wants to be brought into an office or into a conference room and said, hey, let's sit down and get to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
You as the boss, leader, whatever, manager, you're always at the advantage because they have a perception of you as being up here and they're down here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I've always tried to do in building relationship is I have tried to find something on their comfort level that we could do together and that's going to get them relaxed. Perfect example I give to everybody is I had a young man, he was very early in his career, early 20s, came to work for me and he was constantly concerned about being let go. And I'm like, you
Really?
just you
Okay.
just got here.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
Well, there's something that happened there that's triggering
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And so I just finally said to him one day, I said, look, what do you like to do when you're outside the office? He said, oh, I love to golf. Well, back then I still golfed and I loved to golf. Well, not great at it, but I could hit the ball around. So I said, okay, what? You and I bring your clubs. You and I are going to go golf. And I gave him a day,
Yeah.
and it was in the afternoon and it was work day. And he's like, can we do that? And I said, absolutely. So we went, and it was just him and I, and we got a cart, and I had him drive, and that made him nervous. He thought he was going to wreck the cart and all that, and the first few holes were tense, right? He wasn't letting loose, but the first shot that I shanked and went into the tree line, all bets were off. Because I was self-deprecating.
You.
I was I was trying to be funny and came up with all these excuses and all this other stuff. And he started looking at me differently. It's like, oh, this guy's, he's serious, but he's also, you know, I'm on an equal footing with him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so by the time we got to the back nine, man, it was like we'd known each other for 30 years,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
I learned things about him, and the remainder of the time that I led him and his group, I knew based on the situations, with him, how to deal with him, right? Because everybody's going to have good days and everybody's going to have bad days. And particularly when they have a bad day, I've got to know them well enough to understand what works with them, right? What do I need to do to help them mitigate whatever bad is going on in their life, right? Because it's probably not work, it's probably personal. How do I help them get past that so it doesn't damage them, doesn't damage the work that we're doing, doesn't damage their reputation, right? And it may be as simple as, hey, he's got a good office at home. Why don't you work from home for the next couple of days, so you don't have to deal with the noise of the office?
Yeah.
Or, hey, take a few days off. Get this all straightened out. Just take a few days. I'll cover for you, right? And so by building that relationship one on one and building it in a sincere and genuine manner, you are now able to lead a person. But then when you know that same thing about all of your people, then you're able to then manage them together as a group.
Yeah. Okay. You know what sticks out in everything you've said here? Like, first of all, like, absolutely, like building relationships, that one-on-one, some great examples there. What really stuck out so far is your people are not your competition. And you've said that a few times. And I'm curious what makes you repeat that so many times?
Well, because I faced it with people that were supposed leaders of my group. My team is always going to get the credit. My team's always going to get the exposure. And there were a number of times when I was working for the financial institution I was that we would give presentations to execs. And I would bring my team in because I wanted them to present their portion of it, right? I would be roundly criticized. No, that's not the way to do it. You need to be given the presentation. No, I don't need to be given the presentation. I didn't do the work. My team did the work. They need to get the exposure. They need to get the credit. And they need to be able to explain to the degree that this audience needs to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I was told was, well, you're making us look bad, talking about the people above me, right?
Really?
And it's like,
How so?
I don't know. How am I making you look bad? I'm trying to show you that this group that you're paying to do a job is doing the job and they're doing it really well.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
what I figured out was that they want to be those people above me that would criticize me, they wanted to be the center of the attention, right? They wanted to be the ones getting the exposure. And by me allowing my team to do it, now the pressure was going to be on them to have their people do that, and they didn't want to do it.
Well, I'm going to make some assumptions here, and presumptions is that I think if the people above heard from the people a few layers down, it would cut through all the bullshit
Yep,
and they would be exposed,
yep,
right?
absolutely.
And you had nothing to hide,
No,
right? Because your team, whether you were there or not, your team would say the exact same things you did,
yeah,
right? And I find that in culture, different cultures of organizations, that's very important. That from the top, it's modeled where, hey, actually going over you, William,
yeah,
not over you. Like, I'm going down the
yeah,
chain of command
yeah,
and talk to your people.
you
I want you
betcha.
there
Yeah,
because I want details,
yeah,
right? I want to hear unfiltered. And I've seen leaders do that, right?
yeah,
Like, they've went over and actually, let's hear it from the people closer to the front lines. And there's two benefits. First of all, you get exposure to all the people who are doing the work. And then second of all, like, exactly as you said, like, you actually get the details you need. Like, I can make some stuff up, right, at my level,
right.
and a lot of things you are making up, right?
Yeah,
Or extrapolating,
yeah,
thinking on your feet,
yeah.
not making up, but
Right,
extrapolation,
right. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But hey, you want an actual story? Let's talk to, you know,
yeah,
Mr. Bob over there,
yeah.
who's talking to this customer, working on this problem every single day and just
Every
pounding
day.
his head on his
Yep,
desk because
yep.
it's not getting solved,
Right,
right?
right.
That's who you're going to get it from. But that is very interesting. It is telling of corporate cultures too, when they see that as a threat.
Yeah, and again, I mean, when you try to lift your people up like that, again, to me, and this is my experience, it gives them a sense of ownership, right? Because hey, the results of this, people are looking at me to be the one to deliver this. And one of the other comments that I had was, well, people are going to perceive that you're not doing anything. And I said, well, that's fine, other than the fact I'm leading this group,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So is leadership a role or is it not? Is leadership important or is it not?
Yeah.
Remove me from the equation and see how that team
Watch what
functions.
happens.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yes. And those have been conversations I've had over the years with folks.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
so what do you do? It's like, who inspires these people and who gives them
yeah.
direction, who actually sometimes begrudgingly too, but hey, we need a change because of organizational change. You're leading them in that direction. You can get rid of a whole layer, and which is happening in corporate America and everywhere else right now. Watch what happens when one leader has 15 directs. Watch what happens.
Yep.
It's messy. It
It
gets
is.
very messy, inconsistent,
Yep.
and yeah, you don't have the direction on the teams.
Well, and if you have the wrong personalities in those manager roles,
Hmm.
now you've got a cutthroat environment to where everybody's now wanting to posture to be the
Well,
new
yeah. If
it
you got
person.
50, heck, I've been in teams of 5 where
Yeah,
it's cutthroat,
yeah,
right? Never mind
yeah,
teams of 15. 15's
yeah,
even worse,
yeah.
where, they're not going to have one-on-ones.
Right.
Like I have a lot of respect for Jensen Huang, who leads NVIDIA,
Hmm.
but he has like 20 directs as the CEO. He says he doesn't have one-on-ones. So, and he actually says it with pride. Oh, well, we just go get things done. I'd be very I'd be very interested in what that corporate culture is, right?
Yeah,
It's already cutthroat enough, especially at that level, right? Now, I think he's creating even more cutthroat culture
I do
by
too.
doing that, right? It's going to be the loudest person gets his ear,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, and you know as well as I do because of your experience that if he did have one-on-ones and not only had one-on-ones but then had one-on-ones with the group together, the synergies that could come out of that would exponentially make that company greater.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just the way it works.
Well, yeah,
So it's
and the ideas you get.
dynamics. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the
the ideas you
dynamics.
get too when you get to know the people
Yeah,
below as well. Like you see inconsistencies, then you got to be the glue too. Like,
you
hey,
betcha.
Team A over there, I got to know them. I see what they're doing well here. It's the intangibles that's not part of a quarterly business review. It's those intangibles you get to understand, and you apply intangibles, and it's the how of doing it versus like just the outcomes.
Right.
And we don't spend enough time on the how. We want to just see the outcomes.
Yeah.
So
That's right. And again, we were talking earlier, what was my opinion, the difference between leader and manager is leaders are able to explain the how and the why, right? And give that vision of why we're doing what we're doing. And I've always tried to the best that my ability was, when you explain the why, I would look at the team and say, okay, guys, here's the how, what's being proposed. The challenge to you is make that how better, make it more efficient, make it more robust, whatever. But take that and as your baseline and see if we can improve on it.
yes. Well, William, it's been a little over 30 minutes with me and you.
Wow.
I know. I told you it's going to fly by. One last question, and it's a closing tradition I have on this podcast.
Yes, sir.
And it's one question. And that question is what's one question I haven't asked you, but I should have asked you?
Um,
Your reaction is the same reaction of every single guest.
I would say the one question that I rarely get asked is, I really enjoyed my career following what I've talked about today? And yes, I have, because of the relationships that I still have with people that reported to me 20, 30 years ago,
Hmm.
right? And we may not talk every day, every week, every month, whatever, but I still keep in touch with them, right? And that relationship's still there. And I think everyone I've talked to, they've all had fond memories of our time together.
Wonderful, sir. That's great. Well, William, thank you very much for joining me here today.
David, appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, if folks need to find you, what's the best way to get in contact with you and see what's going on?
Everything's through my website, williamcdavis.net. I've got a number of different tabs there that you can contact me through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the link to my books. They're both on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback. And so there's a link there that takes you to the website. So, thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, and my mission is to help leaders grow, lead with impact, and build thriving teams. If you found this valuable, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow leader. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.